the mother hen who's done his job very, very well. So thanks to you, Dato, and certainly to Sarah and to Bridget and all you guys. So appreciate it. And I think it'd be amiss of me not to recognize both the intellectual inspiration and the intellectual sort of anchor of this exercise, my good friend Fred Starr, that I wish he was here today, but he's really, there is no CAMCA without him. So I think we should all recognize Fred Starr with a very big applause, because we wouldn't be here without him. With that, let's get down to the topic of which is transportation, trade and transport corridors. In fact, when CAMCA was started, and Fred talked about it, entire CAMCA meetings were taken over by transportation corridor. They used to be the starting conversation, the middle conversation, and the very end. And it's really much happier and richer that it has moved on to important and different issues as presented by the Kyrgyz fellow. I thought that is the much more interesting feature in some ways than physical manifestation. But we're talking about physical manifestation, and we've got an outstanding panelists here. 2 government people, 2 private sector folks. I'm going to ask my colleagues on the panel to sort of give a 5-minute introduction of their priorities, how you see it, trade and transport corridors. And without getting into the history, it would be good to see the priorities that you have today and for near-term future. And then we'll come back and have conversation free-flowing depending on what you say. So I'll first and foremost start with Ambassador Ina. I think, Ambassador, thank you very much for joining us. I can tell you that ambassadors from Lithuania are the ambassadors of the most important countries in the world nowadays from EU, whether it be Mongolia or United States, and they do an extraordinary job. So I think Jovita, your colleague, is doing a fantastic job in DC, same as you here. And it may be not amiss to say that there is a long time coming European Union interest, presence, and engagement with the CAMCA region. And under President Ursula von der Leyen, I think the EU has stepped up in its game in Central Asia and CAMCA region. So it'd be great to hear from you. What are your vision, what you have done, what you plan to do? Over to you for 5 minutes opening comment.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having European Union here. And can you hear? And yeah, now it's working. I could hear that it was not working properly. For me, being in Mongolia is also very good to see, especially Central Asia nearby. And I also, in April, went to Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, went by car up to Dushanbe. And I was really impressed by changes in the countries. And I was crossing the borders on foot there also was very interesting to see how everything is developing. So you see that for European Union, I will speak today only about Central Asia and Mongolia, because from Mongolia it's easier to identify this part of this bigger region. We see Central Asia as the strategic partner. And you know that we had quite a number of high-level meetings between the EU and Central Asia, including ministerial, and just recently the summit we had. And during the summit, it was elevated to strategic partnership. And why we see the importance of especially also Central Asia, because of it is in a very strategic geographical location, but we also want to assist in this rapid development. And we see lots of potential for cooperation in different areas, but today we will speak about connectivity, where I would like also to mention not only connectivity in transport, but also digital connectivity, which is not less important. And seeing Mongolia, which is, very close to Central Asia, but also pressed in between 2 very big neighbors. And especially after the war in Ukraine, this balance to get more partnerships for Mongolia became even more important. And we see that this aim to cooperate more with Central Asia is very obvious here. We have many high-level visits coming, and we will have Uzbekistan president next week here as well. And we also see that Mongolia is developing a lot of projects that could be also combined with Central Asian countries. They just opened the embassy in Uzbekistan, and also flights to Uzbekistan will start. They have flights with Kazakhstan. So for certain projects that we do in Central Asia, we could have a good extension to Mongolia because of proximity. And later on, I will develop on that.
Well, in fact, it'd be good to hear from you right now. I mean, some thoughts on how the programs that EU is working on Central Asia that you think can be extended to Mongolia. That is really the evolution of CAMCA, so it'd be good to see.
Okay, because we have quite a few of projects that starting, for example, with digital connectivity. We have the big project on internet and also satellite connection, where we work with Central Asian countries to establish very safe connection, not only within the region, but also with Europe. And those antennas are already working in some of the countries, and we see a big feasibility if Mongolia wishes so to be used also with a separate gateway for Mongolia. Also, there is in a pipeline one interesting project, Copernicus, which is for Earth monitoring data. This is envisaged for 2027 and 2032, and that would be for Central Asia, Mongolia, and Pacific. And this data would be very important to be used for a lot of different purposes. But for Mongolia, it would be used for natural disaster monitoring, for land use observation, because we know that it's a vast area and it's very, very difficult to observe it here. Also, it could help also geological association to look at their mineral resources and to survey them, and even also for observation of the border, which is with technologies is much easier. So for our forestry partnership that we have here in Mongolia, that would be also a good tool to implement Paris commitments. So we see it as a very good and feasible tool. What I also wanted to mention that for Central Asia, that you know that there were many pledges for connectivity projects, and we spoke about billions of euros that was pledged during the summit as well for global gateway projects, like 12 billion euros for the entire region. And also during the Investors Forum, where we had cooperation platform that was established, and the meeting for coordination will happen in Uzbekistan this year. For different projects, European Union with the partners also pledged 10 billion euros. So it's really a huge amount. And what we see also a big possibility as well, because European Investment Bank in establishing the regional representation office in Central Asia. It's a big step into the region. But we also want to mention that European Investment Bank is very much interested in supporting projects here in Mongolia. And I'm sure that we will find many projects that we could work on, including also on infrastructure and connectivity. And we had quite a few already of missions of European Investment Bank, and they are coming next month as well to look for the potential to work together here. Okay. Maybe I stop here.
Now this is great, but we'll come back to this, but two important issues. One, the European Investment Bank, EIB, having a presence in the region is a big deal. It's a pretty big deal for all the people who wanted to get finances in the region. And the second is this digital connectivity using satellites, so that you're not limited, the region is not limited of its internet connection by just as large neighbors that it has another option on. So those are really big deals. We'll come back to critical minerals. But Uzbekistan lies at the heart of Central Asia. I think its political transformation has really been the big driver in changing the entire CAMCA region. I think it'd be useful to hear from you, my good friend, as you guide the foreign ministry in Uzbekistan, how you deal with it. One thing else, I'll come back to the EU, but should be something all of you push for. You know, in our government, in the United States or EU, we split the region into 3 different geographies within our diplomatic bureaucracies. A big push should be, hey, let's put CAMCA region as one, so that this idea of Mongolia, Central Asia, we get away from it and we really represent and reflect that in our geographical bureau administrative priorities the same way. But over to you, my good friend. Talk to me about Uzbekistan vision.
Hello. Thank you, Dr. Kaush. I'm very pleased to join this discussion and share a few thoughts on how transport development is seen in Uzbekistan. Today, yesterday, much has been said about the strategic importance of this sector, and it is indeed one of the key pillars of connectivity for the CAMCA countries. Transport and logistics are the starting point for boosting trade in goods. Reliable connections are always the foundation for building production chains, and of course, transport infrastructure requires major investments, and in our region, the investment gap amounts to hundreds of billions of dollars. That's why the issues of transport, logistics, and trade development are always high on the agenda in regional summits and cooperation platforms. Recent political level discussions have highlighted the need to create a diversified network of transport corridors across this vast region in the direction north-south and east-west. The speakers from Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan, I think, will tell about the development of the middle corridor. In this context, I would like to share some insights from Uzbek experts about southern direction, southern corridor. By the way, in Central Asia, around 80% of the cargo along the middle corridor is transported by the railroads. Over 90% of the total freight volume goes through Kazakhstan, while Uzbekistan share is just over 2%. Let me start by saying that looking at this issue through the lens of competition for cargo flows is not productive. Yet this narrative still dominates the public discourse. In this regard, I would like to emphasize 2 points. First, Uzbekistan actively uses Kazakhstan transport infrastructure to trade with China, Russia, and Europe. This is a natural outcome for our geography. Second, given our own geographic location, we are pursuing a long-term strategy to restore connectivity with South Asia and Middle East. There is simply no other direction for building new transport corridor in our case. As a result of this consistent policy, 2 flagship projects with our participation are already entering the implementation phase: the China-Kyrgyzstan-Uzbekistan and the Trans-Afghan Railway. However, we are not limiting ourselves to those 2 projects. New railway routes are being negotiated with Kazakhstan, and we are also developing multimodal links with Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Afghanistan. But let's be honest, cargo flows along the southern corridor remain significantly very lower. Why is that? The main reasons are technical and security-related concerns. On the technical side, there are still challenges with coordination and management, cargo transshipment and handling infrastructure limitation and bureaucratic procedures. The constructions involve challenging mountains terrain requiring advanced engineering expertise and significant financial investment. When it comes to security, we are closely observing recent events in Iran, the nature of which has been foreseeable for years. In many discussions, there is still a high level of skepticism about the current Afghan authorities' ability to ensure the safety of the new railway within the country. Nevertheless, we in Uzbekistan are convinced that all those problems can be solved with political support, the involvement of international financial institutions, and constructive communication between specialists.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I think everybody has to play around with the mic to see which is the right distance, which does not echo, but I'll leave it to you individually. Let me turn it over to Kazakhstan, your neighbor now, and let's talk from the private sector side. Building transport corridors, as Sanjar just mentioned, is an expensive business. And oftentimes it requires a lot of trade by volume to pay for it. From the private sector perspective, I'd love to hear from your thoughts as to how you see these corridors evolving both for financing and where you see the economic growth potential to make that happen.
Well, if you see our region and the population, so we don't have, we have a huge land, the whole Central Asia, and which requires very, very substantial investments in order to just start the trading between us. So the main opportunity to upgrade our infrastructure and transportation was this route from China to Europe. It's one belt, one road, which was announced like almost 12 years back, which have been thanks to Chinese initiation, which was a good opportunity to upgrade, expand, and invest in the infrastructure, transportation infrastructure, which would of course bring trade and other potential investments. So within 10 years, within one belt and one road, Kazakhstan was able to substantially upgrade the rail stock machinery and the port infrastructure. For example, we have built the Horgos port, which is China-Kazakhstan border, one of the biggest, I would say, non-ocean or ports. The other factor was that we built and upgraded our ports in the Caspian Sea, plus added around 5,000 kilometers of rail in the whole infrastructure of Kazakhstan. So this is a potential investment that we have done within the framework of the transportation to start this One Belt, One Road program. Also, what Kazakhstan did with Turkmenistan, we also, together with them, upgraded our rail infrastructure, which started from our port of Aktau to Turkmenbashi port. And Turkmenistan, they have built maybe one of the best ports in the region, which can handle any kind of cargo. So all that potential infrastructure is there to enhance the trade starting from China and from Europe to China as well, which is kind of maybe a small alternative, but it's still existent, which can handle any type of cargoes at the moment. And starting from the Ukraine war, that infrastructure is helping a lot. Azerbaijan also expanded its Alat port substantially, which is also expanding at the moment. And port of Poti in Georgia is also doing some great infrastructure investments. However, we still lack the rail stock investment from Poti to Baku, and from Kazakhstan to Baku, from Aktau to Baku, we also lack the shipments and this kind of infrastructure upgrades at the moment. If we can handle that, I think there is an opportunity which can give some boost to the transportation network in the sector or in the region.
Okay, well, I hadn't planned it that way, but it's working out well. So we started in Mongolia, went through Central Asia, the CAMCA journey, comes over to Azerbaijan, and we just talked about some of the limitations and what may be the promises of going forward. So great to hear from you, Emil. And after that, I'll have one more round I'll ask, and then after that, if some people from the audience are very keen to raise a question, feel free to do so. We'll come around to you.
Thank you. My name is Emil Majidov. I am a fellow from 2017, quite long ago. My angle is, well, it's a kind of triad because I've worked for the government as overseer for Azerbaijani Transit Council. So I was part of the interministerial discussion on how we develop our transit. I also served on the board of Azerbaijani Railways, so I have an angle on how large corporation infrastructure companies are looking at what happens in the region. And now I run my own tracking company, tracking and some air freight. So I'm seeing it as a private sector now, as someone who is on the corridor. I'll share with you a couple of thoughts. If you give me the map, that would work better. Without map, I'll also survive, but map is better. Yeah, so I'll tell you a couple of provocative thoughts and leave it to the discussion. First one, this is the map we all see all the time. What does it really mean? Does it really reflect reality? I wouldn't say so. Frankly, I don't believe in corridor as a logic. Due to a very simple fact. That's not how the trade in this part of the world worked historically. Even the term that we keep on referring to, the so-called Silk Way, is an artificial construct that was thought up by a German. Obviously, they are good at such things. He thought of, okay, let me take the historic data and single out what was really happening there. So he came up with an idea in 19th century that there was a Silk Way, and it was transporting mainly silk from China to Europe. That's not so. There was no Silk Way. It was a carpet. It was a carpet where basically things were coming from China via Urgench into Russia, from Russia via Azerbaijan into Middle East, from Mediterranean via Khorasan and Iran into Central Asia and so on. So it was a carpet, never a corridor. And frankly, if you look at the figures of the corridor today, you will understand the similar logic. Absolute majority of the goods on the so-called corridor are deriving from Central Asia. They are not coming from China. And the moment then they will be coming from China is very, very far away. Because if you look at the China to Central Asia infrastructure, this infrastructure supports basically container shipments. And container shipments, if you ask the corridor people what is the throughput capacity of the corridor when it comes to containers, they will say you things between 80,000 TEU to 300,000 TEU, depending on scenarios. But if you look at the south, at the ocean route, it's 220 million TEUs per year. So the corridor with its 100,000 TEUs is, well, a portion of a 1%. That means we are not, this map is very misrepresentative. We are not in a direct competition with the sea route. We are in a different story. However, there is a lot of bulk goods on the corridor, what we call the corridor. And this is coming mainly from Central Asia, and this is a historical fact. This has to do with the fact that the backbone of the system is a Soviet railway system. And Soviet railway system loved bulk good. This is how it operated. And it's not good for containers. We will have to relearn to work with containers. We will have to relearn or learn how to switch to the mode, operational mode, which is good for international business. And when I say that I don't like corridors, I don't mean I don't like this project. But I think the project should be thought again about, and we need to come up with what Mrs. Ambassador absolutely rightly said. We have to come up with connectivity strategy, not a corridor strategy. Connectivity strategy is a strategy where our countries, CAMCA countries, come together and think of ways to connect to main world seaports. Sometimes we can do it alone. Azerbaijan has done a lot of good job. We have terminal on Black Sea, we have terminal on Mediterranean Sea, we have a dry cargo port owned by Sokar near Izmir in Turkey, but we need to do more. And lots of things about it. We have to have access to Indian Ocean, we have to have access to Baltic Sea, we have to have access to Black Sea. We have to basically reach out as a region to main connecting ports and main connecting hubs of the world to become competitive. Some of them may even be dry ports. They not necessarily have to be seaports, but they have to be some points where real actual trade happens. And if we manage to do that, then I believe that our Kyrgyz fellow made a very good statement about the future unicorn. I believe the unicorn is possible when we do that. You have to have the region large enough and the region with an economy which is so integrated and where countries are trading with each other. I looked up the statistics. Intra-regional trade in CAMCA region is, well, depending on the method, is 5 to 10%. This is nothing. This is like, you cannot create a unicorn if you don't trade with your neighbor. So we have to trade with each other, and we have to come up with a connectivity strategy. We have to reach out to large ports. That's how I see the strategy. Thank you. Yep. I didn't use it. It was not really shown.
All right, I think that sort of, let's leave that map on just for a minute since we have the map now. I would submit this statement and then ask for your comments on it, and then I'll open it up. You know, when we look at transportation, there are sort of three important regional connectivity initiatives at this moment. And they all sort of converge in Eastern Europe in one shape or the other. And so one of the more important ones within the Eastern Europe is this, you know, whether you call it a 3 Seas initiative, but let's just call Eastern Central Europe, and the land between the Baltic Sea, the Black Sea, and the Adriatic Sea. That's next to Italy. That sort of goes up to Trieste and Venice and that area. And this is both economically and the security-wise the most dynamic area of Europe. Poland is certainly one of the largest, fastest growing economies of Europe. And so you'll find, and now with I think a more different posture of NATO that goes all the way from Finland to Romania, so you would have both security and economic incentive in Europe to build north-south corridors, which mostly used to be east-west. North-south corridors in the Eastern Europe. So that's one important area that is going on. The second is the India, Middle East, and Europe Economic Corridor, which was launched at the 2023 G20, in which is, again, India, Middle East to Europe. And that is just retracing the old historical routes that went all the way back to the Roman Empire. So if you looked at the map of Roman Empire coins, where they are found outside of the empire, the biggest concentration is in the Indian Peninsula, by far the biggest concentration. And in the times between around AD 100 to 400, going back from BC 200 to AD 400, you'd find that almost 30% of the Roman Empire's budget, annual budget, was done by customs duty on the Indo-Mediterranean trade. So that is resurrecting again. And the Middle East plays a very important role within this because they want to diversify. And India's third and fourth largest trading partners are UAE and Saudi Arabia, respectively. So you've got an Eastern Europe, you've got an India, Middle East, Europe corner, and then it triggered what you just told me. You know, there is a corollary to India, Middle East, Europe, to Central Asia, Caucasus, Europe. Now that is basically CAMCA region, and I'm putting Afghanistan and Mongolia within the Central Asian grouping. And so Central Asia, Caucasus, Europe, which is basically goes to the center while this comes. And all these three triangles come together largely within the Black Adriatic Sea part of the world. This will happen and will change because there are strong economic and security reasons why people are going to invest in this. The question really is from the Central Asian side, what is the strategic vision here to connect with these two parallel and to some degree complementary corridors that are going, which I would think would transform the next time we met here 5 or 10 years, the world would look very, very different. So I'm going to ask Ambassador Ina, I think your thoughts on this as you see coming from Lithuania, I mean, having the Baltics will play an important role connecting via Baltica, Rail Baltica between Finland to Poland and through the Central Europe. And how do we make sure that CAMCA region feeds into the growing energy of Central Eastern Europe in everything that we talked about?
It is quite clear that European Union also was always looking for some additional routes. And Central Asia was very much in focus all the time. Sometimes it's difficult when you have some hot points in between. And sometimes it's also changing, everything is changing and fluid because of what is happening politically in the world. Now, like for Mongolia, for example, if you looked at with two neighbors, one neighbor is getting sanctions, then you also have to look for another access. So this is also a big issue. I worked in China before, and I know that we always were looking at this alternative possibility, not only to use seaports, but also to use another connectivity through railways to go to Europe. But also what we need to keep in mind all the time, building those networks and roads and movement by railway, that we need also to encourage trade to make it work. Because the biggest challenge, for example, with China was always, you get your trains full of goods going to Europe, and then they are getting empty going back. So we really need to always understand that to have railway working, they have to be filled with something. So why our session is also about trade, but we didn't speak about trade that much, because we don't have a connectivity without trade, because trade has to somehow make this work. Because otherwise you need to have a lot of subsidies for the railway network if it gets empty going back, and it's not very feasible. So when we are projecting different routes and making infrastructures, we need to remember always that it has to be also somehow paved with good trade facilitation and having it working. Otherwise, it would be very difficult. And why? Because of that, we also, for example, for Mongolia, we try to get more European investment and European trade with Mongolia because it's very important for both sides. And in October, for example, we will have the first ever European Mongolian Business and Investment Forum here. We had forums, but they were mostly of different countries, bilateral only, like, France, Mongolia, or Germany, Mongolia. But now we will have it also like European, where we will speak also about infrastructure and connectivity as well. So my point would be, I see a big potential in this region. We need to have better interconnectivity within the region, but also, of course, with Europe. But speaking about this, we also need to look at another aspect to make trade work well.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me turn it over to my Kazakh friend and then to the Uzbek, and I'll come back to the Azeri. One of the important issues, and Fred often talks about, the CAMCA region is stronger if it's together as a one big region, but for resiliency, but also for a market share of a larger economic market. The second is, as was mentioned by your colleague on the panel here from Azerbaijan, that if I look at the world this way, all of this, it's very fascinating part. There's many things which are odd about this map. One thing is that basically everything starts in either Russia or China and ends up in Europe. So we can have a worldview which is this, or we can have a worldview where Central Asia is where things start, according to him, a lot of markets and others. go over to Europe. I mean, you cannot ignore China. It is the biggest actor both on infrastructure and on business in the region. But I'd like to hear from you as to when you look at a Central Asia, Caucasus, Europe economic corridor, what are the options both in a, there are two things here. One is how would you pitch it to business grouping, and how would you raise money of it while also improving the resiliency and somewhat autonomy, strategic autonomy of the region going forward?
I mean, for the trade to grow in the levels that we'd like to see, the transportation infrastructure is very important. That's the key. And what we, at the moment, the investments that we have to do in the transportation infrastructure can really, really support some certain kind of a trade opportunities among those countries. Our infrastructure is not adequate, unfortunately, and we have vast lands. That's why we start from the transportation, and then we go to the trade, and then we see how we can improve other factors or other investments.
Okay. Now, Sanjar, let me come to you. I mean, when you mentioned about from the Uzbek side, you focused a lot on rail networks and road, okay. And we heard the panel before us, and also from Ambassador Ina, that you have a disadvantage of distances and low population. How do we overcome this? One way is through digital connectivity, perhaps even with satellite digital connectivity, as was mentioned by the EU colleague. So what are the visions from Uzbekistan for looking not just on rail and road connection, but also on digital connectivity within the strategic vision?
Thank you. Just before lunch, I participated in the session about IT and tech sector in CAMCA region, and a lot of was told about Uzbekistan, because now we created a very big infrastructural objects in Tashkent, and not only in capital, also in all regions of our country, to support a very huge program called 1 million coders. And nowadays we can feel the results of this program and through the evaluation. I'm not a specialist, but I can see in the city, in the country, that many possibilities opening in this sector, because Uzbekistan is most isolated country in transportation of goods, but IT sector is unique opportunity for our young generation to be part in world network of different IT companies. And by the way, many of them coming now to Tashkent. An example, Yandex. Yandex is growing very fast in Uzbekistan. I think 600 or 700 coders they have only in Tashkent, which working not only for Yandex Uzbekistan, but also for big this ecosystem of this company. But I would like also turn back to railways, to railroads, because for us very crucial is this railroad to Afghanistan. And we held in Termes last month a wonderful conference on connectivity between Central and Southern Asia, which was dedicated to promote initiative of President Majidov from 2021 about reconstruction the ties between two regions, between countries, of two regions with a strong involving of, deep involving of Afghanistan. And I think it's very unique and best platform to create a strategic dialogue about what you said. So this communication, this connectivity process need real long-term strategy. And it's not easy to, in very fast time, to describe it everything, but this you need a sustainable dialogue, which can provide by this Termes dialogue platform. And this platform was held.
You gotta keep it slightly far, so there's not.
Okay, sorry. This was a unique thing because it was in Termes, in this Euratom International Trade Center, where, for example, a citizen of Pakistan and Afghanistan can stay visa-free for 15 days. The center includes production facilities, shops, restaurants, hotels, clinics, and training centers. This project, I think, is important for boosting trade and exports of industrial and consumer goods made by entrepreneurs from Afghanistan, Pakistan, and other countries. I focused on this example to show how effective such initiative can be, and step by step, projects in Afghanistan are become more realistic and achievable. Thank you.
Okay, no, thanks. We'll come back to Afghanistan. We've talked a lot about sort of CAMCA region within the Central Asia, Mongolia, and Afghanistan side. I'd like to hear from you more the Trans-Caspian side of things, the Caucasus end of stuff. And so certainly Azerbaijan plays an important role in the Caspian Sea. We've got Georgia and we've got Armenia. So, you know, as we go forward, there is a danger of Caucasus being really the bottleneck as opposed to the driver of this exercise. So it'd be interesting to see, we need more than sort of one way of crisscrossing the Caucasus, not just going down the valley from, you know, basically as from I think Baku to Tbilisi and out to Poti or Anaklia. So I would like to hear from your thought, not only from sort of peace way of democratic way to engage Armenia or others, but looking at more than one sort of multiple ways across the Caucasus, reaching not only Black Sea, but also Turkey, if Black Sea with Russian Crimea or the war going on gets less and less interest. So what are the thoughts on that, both in the private sector and the public?
Yeah, the sad reality is that Caucasus, well, this part of the world, what we call South Caucasus now, is a traditionally logistical crossroad. So everyone was passing through this. And for the last 30 years, because of Armenian and Azerbaijani conflict, that was not the case. The region basically was divided into a few pieces and became a logistical bottleneck, as you rightly said, rather than opportunity. We used this 25 years to build up a corridor with Georgia, which is operational and is not likely to become a bottleneck in at least next 7-8 years, simply due to the figures. We upgraded the ports, throughput capacity of railways is a very relative term. You can calculate it differently, but if you look at the design of Azerbaijani and Georgian railways, they can pull through 50 million tons per year. So it's how you handle it rather than what you build is important. You are bringing in Armenia, obviously, into a conversation. I think probably behind the doors, the logistical conversation is the key now. And it's a natural post-conflict process where sides are trying to come up with a plan that works for everyone. But my understanding is things are happening and probably will continue to happen. My understanding is Pashinyan is in Turkey now, so probably going to be one of the topics, and I'm sure that this will continue. We had the peace agreement text agreed on a few months ago. So I expect that within the next 3 years, region may get reconnected. And there are more reasons for that. You look at the map now, you look at a very symbolic map now of how airplanes are now flying from east to west, and you'll see that majority of them are flying through a very narrow corridor in the South Caucasus, because both north and south are now basically flight free. And that means that there is a lot of logistical pressure on Southern Corridor at the moment to work efficiently. So I'm sure it will bear some fruits.
Okay, all right. We've only got 5 minutes, so if there's any burning question, okay, one, very quickly, and then I'll do the concluding stuff. You just state your name and association, please. Yeah.
As you spoke already about the connectivity. My question is having two dimensions, one from our friends from Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, to be answered, and one from Madam Ambassador. From Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, you know, the Kabul Passage and Trans-Afghanistan are two, corridor that Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan plus the logistic hub, which is recently established in Herat province, are doing by Afghanistan, Turkmenistan, and Kazakhstan, and Kabul passages by Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Uzbekistan. When we see the research, there was previously a competition between Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, and these two projects, there are advantage and disadvantage of cost and time in connecting these two. So I want to know, the policy of both the countries about, either competition or cooperation in these two projects. And Your Excellency, Madam Ambassador, Taliban are not a legitimate government. How the EU policies are, considered in, implementing this project in your perspective? Thank you.
Okay, well, so thanks a lot. Very briefly, yes, go ahead.
I don't think there is any competition between Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan towards Afghanistan building any railway. In fact, with all due respect, that kind of a railway doesn't make sense at all, to build a railway from Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan to Afghanistan. We don't have enough trade. There is no trade flow to justify any kind of investments, and plus building any kind of a rail network to Afghanistan, it's very super expensive because of the mountainous areas, a lot of infrastructure hurdles we have. So that's financially doesn't make sense. That's it.
All right. Do you want to add to that very quickly? We're out of time.
We do not compete with the two projects. We, for example, focusing on our own project, and yes, there is some technical issues during negotiations, but strategically we thinking that many roads, many projects in Afghanistan is a better thing for developing these countries. This is our position.
Okay. Madam Ambassador, I'll come back to you. How do you deal with Taliban? That very quickly. Yes.
Simply, I don't think that I would be in a position to answer this question, but I simply want to say that for the projects in the region, we always speak with the countries in the region, and it's their choice what they are deciding, because we come into partnership for the projects that are most valuable and most important for the countries around.
Okay, very quickly, a very quick last round. I just want you to say one thing that you find most promising for trade and transport within the region. Just if you had to tell them, focus on this in next 5 years, what would it be? I'll start from Kazakhstan.
For us, the best would be if we can build a full railway network to Iran, if everything will be okay with Iran.
Okay.
Build more roads.
More roads, okay. Ambassador?
For Mongolia, it's a big issue, the transportation. So I would wish Mongolia really to get better connectivity and the way they choose, because now it's also, they speak more about aviation as well, not only about roads. So it's to make the strategy viable and workable.
We need, sooner or later, we will need a free trade zone. We will need to unite into a joint and common trade and investment space, and the infrastructure will follow.
Okay, so very quickly, this is fantastic. I would end with 3 thoughts that you might should take with you. One, the trade transportation discussion is a fast evolving thing. It is really fast evolving because of these 3 drivers: Central Eastern Europe, India, Middle East, Europe corridor, and Central Asia, Caucasus, Europe. Let's call it Central Asia, Caucasus so that we don't confuse middle corridor, north corridor, south corridor. Let's call it by people's name. Corridor business is very dry and boring. You start naming corridors, you lose people who are not in corridor business. It's much better to talk to as a layperson, so Central Asia, Caucasus, Europe corridor. Iran is a big game changer. Whatever happens, whether it's a peace treaty or regime change or things go back to the normal, in any case, it'll have a huge impact on this trade business. We may very well be here next 5 years talking about a very different issue than becomes through it. And the third issue is a really big deal about having satellite connectivity and digital. Digital leapfrogs things while we still wait for road and railroads to build up. The 3 very important parts. Going forward, it is absolutely essential that we break these discussions by the very theme. There should be a railroad and a rail and a road discussion. There should be a digital discussion and a trade discussion. We put them all lumped together, it ends up being too general and too sort of difficult to engage with it. Another important issue within this is really push for CAMCA to be a regional grouping within the important administrative regions which are in US, EU, India in particular. These are big areas. They break it up in small parts. It is utter nonsense. This is where all of us can push for. And when we have these discussions, there needs to be an EU and an American ambassador sitting here and talking about how America and EU are coordinating with CAMCA region to meet their aspirations, not having separate discussions with them, even in a forum like this, which is very, very important, because our engagement collaboratively will be the main key from our discussion going forward. With that, thank you very much for your time, and a big round of applause for our panel, and good luck with the rest of it.